Good evening and thanks for joining us. The top stories today. After 3 years, the Department of Justice has dropped a case against the President's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The move comes as new evidence surfaces that he may be innocent. A Texas salon owner is free after she was jailed for staying open during lockdown. The governor has now said business owners can't do jail time if they stay open. The House Minority Leader launches a China task force. He says it will tackle issues like China's influence on the media and the origin of the virus. The Supreme Court overturns Bridgegate scandal convictions. The associates of former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie are no longer facing jail time. The U.S. military performs a moose walk exercise at an Alaska air base. It's meant to show the world that the CCP virus pandemic has not affected the country's military readiness. In a stunning reversal, the Justice Department is dropping the case against Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. For 3 years, prosecutors held that Flynn lied to the FBI about his conversations with the Russian ambassador. Flynn even confessed to it himself. But the DOJ says they dropped the case as they received new documents that apparently show he's innocent.
The Department of Justice announced on Thursday that it is dropping the criminal case against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The charges against him were the first in a bombardment of criminal trials by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Mueller investigated but did not find any evidence of collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia.
He was an innocent man. He is a great gentleman. He was targeted by the Obama administration, and he was targeted in order to try and take down a president. And what they've done is a disgrace, and I hope a big price is going to be paid.
In late 2017, Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his conversations with a Russian ambassador. But last year, he pulled back his guilty plea, saying his case was a political hit job. U.S. Attorney General Barr appointed attorney Jeff Jensen to review the case earlier this year. Since then, he uncovered handwritten notes from a senior FBI official about why he interviewed Flynn, which read, "What's our goal? Truth admission or to get him to lie, so we can prosecute him or get him fired?" Jensen briefed Attorney General Barr on his findings and advised him to dismiss the case. He agreed.
The nation is gaining pace as it reopens. Even some states' extended home orders are allowing more businesses to operate. And a small Montana school is one of the first in the nation to open, letting students come back today. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more.
Nearly all schools in the nation are closed for the rest of the school year, but this one in Montana is finishing the year in class. It's one of the first schools to let students back in since the CCP virus shut them down.
The teachers get some closure, the students get closure, we can do some year-end assessments.
With Montana loosening up on in-person gatherings, California cracks down. A federal court judge sides with the governor's order to ban in-person church service. Another lawsuit was denied in the Supreme Court after a group of Pennsylvania business owners asked Justice Samuel Alito to overturn the governor's shutdown order. And in other states, even though many stay-at-home orders are extended to the end of the month, they don't seem to carry much weight anymore. Like in Hawaii, a stay-at-home order that doesn't expire until the end of May. But now shopping malls can reopen, along with others. A similar situation in Connecticut, with a stay-at-home technically in place until May 20th, but allowing many to run their businesses.
Nail salons and haircuts, only by appointment only, very strict. Restaurants outside only.
Restaurants moving further in Mississippi. Now people can go inside to eat. That makes at least 10 states allowing customers to dine in. But an unhappy customer, barred from dine-in service at a McDonald's in Oklahoma, led to violence, shooting at least 2 employees after being told the dining area was closed. Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The Texas governor has removed jail time as one of the consequences for business owners who violate his stay-at-home orders. The change comes as the Texas Supreme Court today freed a beauty salon owner from jail.
Wrote
Business owners across the country can't afford to stay closed any longer and are defying the lockdown. One salon owner in Dallas is free today after she was sentenced to jail for refusing to close her business.
I have to disagree with you, sir, when you say that I'm selfish, because feeding my kids is not selfish. I have hairstylists that are going hungry because they'd rather feed their kids.
She got a citation last month, but stayed open anyway, saying she needed the money. She was sentenced to a week in jail and ordered to pay $3,500. But the state attorney general criticized the decision and ordered her release, writing, "Locking her up is a misguided abuse of power. Release her now so she can return to her family." Her supporters have raised over $500,000 on GoFundMe, and the governor is on her side too, saying in a tweet, "I am eliminating jail for violating an order. Criminals shouldn't be released to prevent COVID-19, just to put business owners in their place." His new executive order makes it impossible for someone to be sentenced to jail for violating his lockdown, applying to any case that came about after April 2nd.
And it's not only in Texas that business owners are moving ahead of governor's orders. In at least 6 other states, business owners are taking risks to reopen. And in other news, the House Minority Leader today launching a China task force. Now, he says the House was working on it long before the pandemic. It will take on things like China's influence in the United States and find out the origins of the virus.
On Thursday, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy launched what he says was supposed to be a bipartisan China task force. The Republican said he couldn't wait any longer for Democrats to cooperate.
We cannot wait any longer. The stakes are too high to sit idly by, which is why today I'm announcing the Republican-led China task force. And I invite the Democrats to join with us. There was one moment in time they said yes. A few months ago, they said no.
McCarthy said the task force will focus on China-related topics like the regime's influence on the media, universities, and think tanks, as well as the origin of the virus.
Economic threats to our government and our allies, efforts to gain the technologically advantage, and role in the origin and spread of COVID-19.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi did not immediately reply to us for comment. McCarthy said the task force was originally going to be split 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans. The task force will be led by Congressman Mike McCall and joined by 14 other Republican House members. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party is under growing scrutiny for its handling of the pandemic. But for some experts, cover-ups under the Chinese regime are nothing new. Our UK correspondent Jane Worrell explains.
Since December, the Chinese Communist Party has silenced its citizens who have tried to reveal the true nature of the CCP virus. Beijing's handling of the pandemic has put the regime's lack of transparency to the forefront.
I'd say, the CCP's efforts to cover up bad news, to downplay bad news, that happens almost on a daily basis.
Medical ethics group Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting released a report this week outlining Beijing's pattern of deception. To deny, hide, propagate disinformation, then capitalise on the gains. They say the regime's cover-up of the virus follows this pattern.
History has repeated itself with the cover-up of COVID-19. This is not the first time that we have seen a systematic cover-up of medical tragedies in China.
In 2019, an International People's Tribunal in London, chaired by former UN war crimes prosecutor Sir Geoffrey Nice, unanimously concluded that forced organ harvesting has happened in China on a substantial scale and still continues. They found the main victims were practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline suppressed in China. The CCP was invited to give evidence at the tribunal several times but did not respond.
The only response, the only sort of official response, was from the World Health Organization, which doesn't even look at this issue. And they basically came back with a bunch of warmed over Beijing arguments about why this wasn't true.
And there are no signs that forced organ harvesting in China has shut down during the pandemic. Media reports from March show Chinese doctors boasting about a successful double lung transplant. The unusually short wait time indicates that someone was likely killed for those organs. But there is a growing chorus of politicians in the UK wanting a review on UK-China relations. Human rights advocate Benedict Rogers has been calling for a rethink for years.
One of the good things to come from this terrible crisis is a rethinking of policy and of attitudes towards not the Chinese people and the country, but the Chinese Communist Party regime.
He says finding the cause of the virus is not the only thing that needs investigating. Forced organ harvesting also needs to be investigated further. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of two former officials charged in a New Jersey scandal known as Bridgegate. One of the officials had already started serving a prison sentence, but now both will go free.
The Supreme Court on Thursday unanimously reversed the federal convictions of two former New Jersey political operatives who orchestrated the 2013 Bridgegate scandal. The top court ruled in favor of Bridget Kelly and William Baroni. The pair were charged with fraud for a scheme to create traffic chaos on the frequently congested George Washington Bridge as payback against the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, for not supporting then New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's re-election. Kelly was Christie's deputy chief of staff at the time, and Baroni was deputy executive director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The government argued that Kelly and Baroni committed fraud when they conspired to close 2 of 3 local access lanes leading to the toll plaza of the George Washington Bridge. Their action caused gridlock for Fort Lee's commuters for 4 days. Justice Elena Kagan pointed out that for the two to have violated the federal fraud statutes, the government needed to show that the object of their scheme was to obtain Port Authority's money or property. The court did not find evidence of that conclusion. Kelly will serve none of her 13-month prison sentence, which had been on hold while she appealed. Baroni started serving his 18-month sentence, but was released when the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case last year.
And in Belgium, hospitality workers laid down kitchen jackets in the formation of a cemetery. The scene draws attention to the stagnant and troubled situation the country's tourism industry finds itself in.
Belgian chefs laid down hundreds of jackets in the center of Brussels to highlight the plight of hotels, restaurants, and cafes that have been shuttered for nearly 2 months. One of the protests organizers said the action was partly to show the scale of the industry, which 10% of Belgians rely on, and that normally earns $19.4 billion a year. Bars and restaurants are ordered to stay closed in Belgium until at least June. Israel has eased many restrictions that were put in place a few weeks ago. Malls and outdoor markets opened on Thursday. Israelis have been confined to their homes or immediate neighborhoods for weeks, but are now allowed to travel within the country. 2 Spanish firefighters have designed a simple and practical disinfection station they provide free of charge to nursing homes in a city in Spain. The portable station is designed to allow healthcare workers to disinfect their personal protective equipment without the help of an additional person. And the death toll in Sweden has surpassed 3,000 today. Sweden took a very soft approach on measures compared to other European countries. Their toll has been higher than that of neighboring countries, but lower than that of Spain, France, and Italy. A chemical gas leak in southern India killed at least 9 people, and emergency services rushed more than 300 to the hospital. Hundreds had to be evacuated from nearby areas. The leak happened at a South Korean-owned battery factory a few days after India relaxed a nationwide lockdown.
And after the break, a Florida law firm is going to bat for healthcare workers by suing the Chinese regime for mishandling the virus. More on that when we return.
Through the eyes of a former National Security Council Chief of Staff, what did the newly unsealed documents in the General Flynn court case reveal? Could it be that there's an unpublished House Intelligence Committee report full of bombshells stuck at the CIA since 2018, one that challenges the conclusions of the intelligence community assessment? And what is the significance of President Trump's appointment of Richard Knell as acting director of national intelligence? In this episode, we sit down with Fred Fleitz, president and CEO of the Center for Security Policy. He previously served as Deputy Assistant to President Trump and Chief of Staff to National Security Advisor John Bolton. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek.
Welcome back. It's still a mystery how many people in Wuhan, China lost their lives to the virus. But now, Chinese officials are silencing residents who've lost loved ones. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the details.
We still don't know how many people died from the virus in Wuhan. The Chinese regime is now silencing residents who've lost loved ones. According to a New York Times report, 7 Wuhan residents reached out to New York-based activist Yang Jianqing, asking for help to sue the regime. One woman said her mother died from the virus after being turned away from several hospitals. Another said her father-in-law died in quarantine. But after several weeks of planning, they suddenly went silent in late April. Yang said 2 of them had been threatened by police. According to Fox News, officials in Wuhan bribed families into silence, paying them around $420 for each relative lost to the virus and offering discounts for cremation and burial services. For many bereaved families, it's not enough. Wuhan resident Zhang Hai is calling for someone to be held accountable. His elderly father died in a Wuhan hospital due to complications from the virus, 3 days before Chinese authorities admitted human-to-human transmission. Mr. Zhang brought his father from another city to Wuhan to be treated for another disease. 1 week later, his father tested positive for the CCP virus. 2 weeks later, he died. For the past 3 months, Mr. Zhang's been raising funds on social media to set up a monument for victims. He's been harassed constantly by authorities. Zhang has noticed authorities are cracking down on discussions about compensation. If more than 5 people decide to take action together, they will be arrested. Another Wuhan resident, Mr. Lu, believes there's little chance families in China will be able to successfully sue the regime.
This is not a society based on rule of law. If you file a lawsuit against the authorities, it's unlikely you'll win. It's almost impossible.
He says anyone who asks the regime to recognize his human rights ends up with all channels blocked. He points out the regime will not give out any compensation because otherwise it would be the same as admitting it was at fault.
The authorities try everything to shift the blame, push away responsibility, and create confusion. It's almost impossible to get compensation. Otherwise, it would be the same as the regime admitting it caused the outbreak itself.
Shen Xue, a Chinese-Canadian writer, believes pursuing human rights in a setting like that is hopeless. She says the Chinese people will only see justice after the dictatorship falls.
The Chinese Communist Party caused the epidemic, and it used all its efforts to cover up, distort the facts, and destroy the evidence. Now you want the murderer to recognize your human rights? That's impossible.
The Department of Homeland Security says the Chinese regime intentionally covered up the virus outbreak to stock up on medical supplies. So a Florida law firm is now suing the regime. The class action suit is brought on by medical workers in the United States. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
According to a Department of Homeland Security report issued on May 1st, the Chinese regime intentionally concealed the severity of the pandemic from the world. The intel documents state the regime did this to stock up on medical supplies needed to respond to the outbreak. On April 8th, a Florida law firm, the Berman Law Group, filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of U.S. healthcare workers against China's Communist Party
for the hoarding and stockpiling and deliberate use of the PPE products that our doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, first responders in the United States need and are not being given because of China's actions to keep it all for themselves and to profit off of our demise.
The Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act protects foreign states from being sued. But the law group says since the CCP engaged in commercial activity in China that directly affected U.S. citizens, they're not immune.
So now that they commercially stockpiled the PPE, they nationalized U.S. corporations that have factories in China to make PPE 10 and 12-fold. They wouldn't let them export it to the United States until later. When they did that, that commercial activity was to the detriment of the world.
In February, Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarro claimed Beijing effectively nationalized U.S. mask-making company 3M inside China and wouldn't let the company export masks to the U.S. In January, the local Shanghai government took control over the handling and delivery of masks from 3M's facilities in the city. The 3M spokesperson said this impacted the company's ability to fill mask orders the way it normally would. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
And coming up, a powerful new hacking tool linked to the Chinese regime's military. Find out what the tool does and who's been hacked after the break.
How do we get to this point? Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Welcome back. The New York Times is reporting on a new hacking tool used by groups with links to the Chinese regime's military. The powerful cyber weapon comes secretly embedded in a file, just like those commonly exchanged through email. It's called a RIA body. When opened by an unsuspecting victim, it enables hackers to remotely copy, erase, or create files, see anything a person is typing, and even search through their computer. It also has stealthy new ways of avoiding detection. The tool was discovered by a cybersecurity firm in Israel when a failed email, supposedly from an Indonesian diplomat in Australia, raised suspicions. The hackers have allegedly used a RIA body against numerous government agencies and state-owned tech companies. The tool has been used by a hacker group called NEIMAN. The earlier report says the group was part of a bureau of the Chinese regime's military. And in other news, U.S. airlines are looking for more federal assistance. They say flights are at historic lows, there are more cancellations than bookings, and even if they don't get a second bailout, they'll face bankruptcy.
The airline industry is looking for more assistance from the government. It comes on the back of the $25 billion it received in March as part of the CARES Act bailout.
The bottom line on all this is a matter of sheer gut survival. These companies have been crippled in a matter of about 7 weeks.
The union leader told Congress yesterday airline carriers are losing up to $400 million per day. Their major costs are fuel and labor. As part of the CARES Act, airlines are required to keep workers paid through September. They also must keep flying current routes. But under lockdown, many of these flights are pretty much empty. Delta's service to Worcester, Massachusetts averaged 1 person per day over the last 22 days.
We're averaging 17 passengers per domestic flight and 29 per international flight. If you've been on a plane, it's eerie.
Airlines can apply for waivers, but are often told to keep flying. At the same meeting, Senator Richard Blumenthal criticized airlines for not giving cash refunds for canceled flights.
You are, forgive me, screwing the very taxpayers whose money is going into your pocket.
The airlines union says there are now more cancellations than bookings, but the carriers are dealing with them lawfully.
In our business roundup, new Jobless claims dip. Luxury retailer Neiman Marcus files for bankruptcy, and Lowe's promises to deliver $1 million worth of flowers to senior homes for Mother's Day.
Over 3 million people claimed for unemployment benefits last week, but the rate seems to be slowing. It's around 700,000 less than the week before. It brings the total during the past 7 weeks to over 33 million, a record figure. The 133-year-old luxury retailer Neiman Marcus filed for bankruptcy on Thursday. It's one of the highest profile collapses yet among retailers. It furloughed much of its 14,000 workers in March. Retailer J. Crew also filed for bankruptcy on Monday. Lowe's will deliver $1 million worth of flowers to senior homes this Mother's Day. The flowers are from small business growers that may have experienced slow business amid the outbreak. Uber will help deliver the flowers to more than 500 long-term care and senior living facilities. The Bank of England said Britain could be headed for its biggest economic slump in over 300 years. The economy may shrink by 25% between March and June, with unemployment doubling to 9% of the workforce.
And coming up, the U.S. Air Force and the Alaska National Guard show the world that the U.S. is still ready for any threat. Find out what they did after the break.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Welcome back. The world can now judge for itself just how ready the American military is for action despite the pandemic. An Alaskan military base performed a Moose Walk military aircraft exercise on Tuesday. Why? To train its members and flex some muscle.
The U.S. Air Force, along with Alaska Air National Guard, showcased America's military readiness on Tuesday. Aircraft including F-22 Raptors practiced a formation called an elephant walk, which is also known as a moose walk at this Alaskan base. Moose are a staple of Alaska's wildlife, and moose is also the nickname of the C-17 Globemaster III aircraft. The exercise was performed at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage. It provides training and shows adversaries that the United States is on guard and ready to protect itself, even as the CCP virus pandemic continues. The most visible planes in the exercise were the F-22 Raptors, one of the military's most powerful fighter jets. At least 26 of them participated. Other aircraft include the C-17 Globemaster III, E-3 Sentry, C-12F Huron, C-130J Super Hercules, and H-860G Pavehawks. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in its current form was established in 2010. Before that, it was 2 separate bases, the Fort Richardson Army Base and the Elmendorf Air Force Base. Alaska is unique in that it is the only place U.S. forces can train with both F-22s and F-35s in the same location. The F-35 is the military's latest high-tech aircraft.
And that's all for today's news. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Paul Graney.